So I guess with that, it is 6 minutes after the hour, wherever you are in North America. And the voice that you're hearing at the moment is mine. It's Adira Levin, and I'm one of the co-PIs for the CanSolve CKD network. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome you all here to today's 2020 Funders Forum. And before we go any further, I'd like to, next slide, hand it over to one of our patient partners, Mary Bocage, for the territory acknowledgement. Mary, over to you.
Thanks, Adira. I would like to acknowledge and thank the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish nations for allowing us to live, work, and grow on their unceded territories. The CanSolve CKD Vancouver headquarters is located here. The Coast Salish people have existed for over 10,000 years along the northwest coast of North America and have a beautiful history. Their spiritual traditions were deeply involved in relationships to the spirit world, including ancestors, guiding spirits, and animal spirits. I reside on land that falls within the boundaries of the Robinson-Huron Treaty of 1850. This is part of the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe people. When French missionaries first mapped our territory, they referred to Lake Nipissing as the Lake of the Sorcerers, since my ancestors were healers who had an abundance of natural medicine and conducted many ceremonies. I would also like to acknowledge the traditional lands that each of you are joining us from today. We are all treaty people. Miigwech.
Thank you, Mary. So this, and I'm coming to you from the unceded territory of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish, and I actually live in Mount Pleasant, which is at the mouth of the Fraser, mouth of the river, where they used to trade salmon. So I'm very grateful to be here, and thank you for that. So this is a thank you to our funding partners. Without all of you, and listed here on this slide, there would be no CanSolve CKD. So from the call from CIHR back in 2014-15 to the stepping up of all of the different health authorities, societies, foundations, industry partners, we've really managed to come to somewhere different. And next slide, please. So today's format is we're going to look back and give you a bit of highlights of where we are at year 4 and the impact that we're having. And then we're also not just going to look back, but also look forward into what we're fondly calling CanSolve CKD 2.0. For those of you that don't remember, CanSolve CKD stands for Canadians Seeking Innovative Solutions to Chronic Kidney Disease. But ultimately what we'd like to do in this hour is ensure that we have some time for question and answers, especially from our funding partners, because I think this is one of those fora where we can actually do that. Next slide, please. So we have 18 projects, 58 publications, 60 patient partners, and over 400 team members. The various logos that you see here are an attempt to maintain and integrate a brand around CanSolve CKD network, because it's quite important that we're seen together and also with all of the different core entities. We're particularly proud of the Patient Governance Circle, the Indigenous Peoples Engagement Research Council, our Wabishku Scanj Learning Pathway, as well as Kidney Link, Kidney Pro, and Record, as well as the rebirth of CNTN in the context of being core infrastructures, if you will, and core programs that really help the network to thrive and survive. Next slide, please. This is a sense of the network footprint that we have, and you'll see by every province or region, we have substantial investments of funds, of projects, and of people. And I think for our funding partners and for CIHR in particular, I think the fact that this truly pan-Canadian network has managed not only to ask and attempt to answer important questions, but also has stimulated the growth of various researchers. We've actually have the gamut of junior to senior researchers. We have numerous projects and many people employed. And as a way of giving back, I think it's important that we recognize that research not only answers questions, but also creates job and career opportunities for people as well. So that network footprint is quite impressive, I would think. Next slide. So what we're trying to do, which was the remit for the SPORE, which is a strategy for patient-oriented research, is to truly drive a cultural change in Canadian nephrology research. We are generating new knowledge about kidney disease and health and care. And I think very importantly, we're building the scaffolding, the resources and infrastructure that we need to enhance kidney research and care, to make it sustainable over a long period. It's a very exciting time to be in the kidney space right now. There are multiple new agents and new strategies and new understandings in kidney disease. So the fact that we're here building this in this moment, I think is particularly important given what we're seeing in the future. Next slide. So how are we changing the culture? Well, as you saw from that video and from Brenda Hemmelgarn's quote here that she also had on the video, it's really changed the way that we all do research. We are now taking patient perspectives integrated into everything we do. We're actually now talking with various industry and other partners to try and get them to truly understand that having people involved at the very beginning of study design through to deployment of the study, through to interpretation of results and dissemination is hugely impactful. We've designed the research programs around top priorities. And as you can, patients are key members of all of our teams informing all those things that I just talked about. And very importantly, we're supporting Indigenous perspectives in research and respectful partnerships with Indigenous peoples and communities over time, and appreciating the variability and variation that exists across this country by province and by community. Next slide. We have our patient, and as part of really testimony to that, we have our patient governance circle update. And for that, I will turn it over to, I just have to remember who's giving it. Who is leading?
It's David.
David, great. David, if I can turn it over to you for the patient governance circle update.
Yeah, thanks very much, Adira. I've been asked to provide people just with a brief update on some of the activities of the patient governance circle. And I'm going to touch on three key initiatives. Next slide. Really, one of the key milestones over the last year has been the evolution of the patient council to a broader and more expanded patient governance circle. We've certainly found over the last number of years, with the growing number of patient partners in the network and the increase in engagement within the network of patient partners, the patient council determined that it was probably timely to take a look at the organizational structure and review and see whether there had to be any changes made in order to meet the new challenges, going forward. So we undertook a visioning exercise for this new governance structure, and this took place back in May last year at our annual meeting. And after much discussion and communication back and forth, it resulted in an expanded structure, which includes 12 to 15 highly engaged patient partners, certainly representing a diversity of lived experiences with CKD. I should also mention that we also took a look and tried to ensure that there was some clarity around roles and responsibilities and mandate, because as I'm sure people can appreciate, that as an organization grows and matures, it needs to take a look at where it was and where it's going, and is it properly structured to meet those new challenges. I should also mention that October 2019 was actually the first in-person meeting for this new expanded governance circle, and that was held in Vancouver. Next slide. Patient partners have also been integral in the whole evolution of the CNTN revisioning process. And certainly with the formation of that new governance structure that they have with 3 key working groups and the executive committee, patients have not only been involved in the revisioning process, but also sit on all 4 groups, including the executive committee, and also 2 patient partners also represent our co-chairs for the executive committee on the CNTN. Additionally, which is interesting, certainly in January 2020, the International Society of Nephrology held a workshop really to vet definitions of kidney failure, and this included certainly researchers and clinical trialists and patient partners. There were actually 6 patient partners sitting on that working group. 3 were from the Patient Governance Circle for CanSolve. There was another 2 from the US and 1 from the UK. I think my understanding is the results of that were to be published at some date. But it was interesting that we had, there were 6 patient partners asked to participate as part of the ISN workshop. The last part I'll just mention is more looking forward and saying with the expanded patient governance circle, we are taking a look at evaluating the whole onboarding process for new patient partners within the network, looking at a mentoring program to support them, as well as obviously providing input to the network on its sustainability initiative and also CanSolve 2.0. And with that, I turn it back.
So Mary, over to you.
Thanks, Adira. I'm giving an update on some of the activities that we've been doing in IPERC, the Indigenous Peoples Engagement and Research Council. Next slide, please. Indigenous patient partners and researchers were part of a panel presentation focused on translations and First Nations people at the World Congress of Nephrology in Melbourne, Australia in April 2019. Kidney donor and recipient Kevin and Craig Satie were our representatives who attended in Melbourne. Prior to the temporary cessation of screening in March 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the BC Kidney Check project screened 133 individuals in 11 communities across the province. Next slide, please. The ongoing development of Wabishki Bijigosganj, a learning pathway to foster respectful relationships with Indigenous peoples in healthcare and research. In October 2019, the network hosted a gathering with knowledge keepers from across Canada, including 2 from British Columbia, 1 from Alberta, 2 from Saskatchewan, 2 from Manitoba, and 1 from Ontario and 1 from Quebec.
So I think that's over to me. So just a couple of highlights on the research that is occurring within CanSolve. So generating that new knowledge, which is important to patients and policymakers, and clinicians. Next slide. So as a reminder, there's 18 research projects across 3 main themes that were prioritized by patients and clinicians: earlier diagnosis, better treatments, and innovative care. Next slide. So we're just going to show a couple of slides that highlight some of the impacts of some of the research that actually was answering the questions that patients prioritized as the most important. So the empathy study, which is occurring across Ontario and Alberta, was essentially evaluating in a cluster randomized trial the rollout of measurement and responding to patient symptoms, which patients told us they wanted to prioritize. That study is just completed now in Alberta and in Ontario, and decisions will, so now this has become part of routine care in Alberta, and we've learned a lot about how other provinces could implement this, and Ontario will be making a decision as to whether they roll it out to all of their dialysis units or just the ones involved in the study. Kidney Check, I think you've heard about before, which is point of care screening in Indigenous communities. And because of the almost epidemic's a bad word to use these days with COVID, but there's also an epidemic of kidney disease. And so this project has been held up because of COVID, but it's won awards for its novel, the model they're using, but as well the way they're screening using an iPad. So that will pick up momentum as we leave COVID. The III team, which is focusing on hemodialysis care, has identified the top 10 challenges from patients' perspectives, and now they're working to create short and long-term solutions to these challenges and rolling those out. Next slide. Just a few more examples. So a website has been created with a lot of support and collaboration from patients to support chronic kidney disease self-management. So in other words, to enable evidence into care so that patients can use this. And this will be being rolled out across being tested, and it'll be rolled out across the country. I think we've all heard about the great work that Amit Garg and Sue and the team is doing around trying to increase living kidney donation in Ontario. They've implemented a variety of interventions, and they're measuring whether that increases the number of living donors that come forward to donate. They've also developed a novel risk calculator app and a transplant ambassador program where patients are going into dialysis units to try to support patients in finding a living donor. And lastly, one of the teams in Manitoba is partnering with a Canadian Primary Care Sentinel Surveillance Network, so hundreds of clinics, primary care clinics, to evaluate and optimize earlier management of patients with chronic kidney disease who are managed in primary care. So these are all priorities that patients and clinicians and policymakers told us were important. Next slide. We're starting to see more publications come to fruition. So almost 60 since 2016, but it's going up, starting to go up exponentially. Next slide. I don't think though that publications on its own, sorry, I thought there, we can leave it there. I don't think publications on its own is what funders are just interested about, although I speak to the quality of the science, but I think the impact and getting it out beyond just the study is what's important. And CanSolve is also developing core infrastructure for that. So over to Jim Adira.
I think, Braden, you're continuing into this section.
I think, yeah, you
Okay.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Well, you'll tell me when I can stop then.
I'll be sure to tell you when to stop, yeah.
So as you mentioned, it's not just about publications, it's also getting evidence into patients' hands. So as I think you'll know in November, so it's almost been a year now, Kidney Link launched, which is an online platform that keeps patients informed about new opportunities to get involved in research and provides access to curated educational resources. So in other words, one of the parts of our missions was to try to increase the number of patients participating in research, and this allows them to know about the opportunities that are available to them. The Canadian Kidney Trials or Nephrology Trials Network has been relaunched with the goal of increasing quality and quantity of clinical trials, and they've reviewed 11 protocols over the past year, including patient partners as fully engaged participants. Next slide. And then Kidney Pro is a new tool that was launched by CanSolve for educating patients about the foundational aspects of health research, specifically kidney health research in Canada. And we have many people involved, Lee and Selena, around telling stories for impact. And actually many patients within our governance group have been involved, not just with CanSolve, but with other groups. in telling their stories and helping them tell their stories. It's an online course that's been taken. Next slide. Okay, and then finally, again, in terms of getting evidence into care, this is a critical part of CanSolve, because if the studies finish and their results are not translated into routine care, then we've failed. So Selena and the KT and Knowledge User Committee have developed a community of practice, which includes members from all of our research teams. So not only are we trying to increase the use of patients in research and skilling up patients and clinicians to work together and researchers to work together, we're also trying to get everybody understanding the best practices around knowledge translation. So that includes a patient engagement toolkit, which helps research teams communicate, identify common goals, and define roles for patients. Next slide. Adira, am I still going? So,
This is a summary, right, of all the things that you just talked about.
yeah, exactly. Lots of people involved from across Canada.
Correct. So now it's over to Jim.
Hi, everyone. It's
Our
my,
audience can tell we've really rehearsed this really well. So, but anyways, over to you, Jim.
hi, everyone. Happy to provide an overview. Heard so much about the considerable efforts to engage patients, to develop infrastructure, and the impact that some of these programs have, and the involvement of over 460 people. So now we focus on actually the financial overview, the underpinning for these very considerable efforts. This pie chart represents the major sources for the funding of the CanSolve CKD Research Network, some $38,500,000 in total. The bright green pie represents the 12.5 million from CIHR, the SPORE funding. And then there are other CIHR funds that individual investigators acquired in programs that were matched within CanSolve CKD that contributed another considerable amount of money, $3.5 million. And you can see how critically important our partner funding is, that 16.6 million in cash was provided by a variety of funders, funding partners, and indeed in-kind support for almost another $6 million. This really represents critical contributions to the research program. The CanSolve CKD is part of the strategy for patient-oriented research at CIHR, and at a minimum has to have one-to-one partner funding. I think it speaks to the enthusiasm and energy within the research community in kidney disease in Canada and in the stakeholder community that indeed we exceeded that one-to-one funding formula. Next slide, please. This graphic depicts the source of some of those partner funding. So you can see that actually health research organizations and provincial renal agencies contribute a significant share. Charitable foundations were the next major group, followed by university and professional associations. And pharma was a major ongoing contributor. And indeed, there were private donors that came forward based on the enthusiasm of individual investigators and programs within CanSolve CKD. So a wide variety of stakeholders contributed significantly to the overall financial structure of CanSolve CKD. Now the next slide, please. Now this is the cross-sectional view of current spending in year 4 of CanSolve CKD that gives you a snapshot of the magnitude of the monies that are devoted towards the research programs. So this year, the total budget expenditures for year 4 were over $6 million. This actually was the budgeted amount, and indeed actual expenditures exceeded this amount, so that now that at steady state, the research program is spending between $6 and $7 million a year in support of a variety of the research projects, the 18 projects and this considerable infrastructure that has been developed. Next slide, please. Now, this actually shows year 4 in a little bit more granularity. It shows that the actual spending versus planned spending. So the total spending was about 102% of the original budgeted spending, and this actually required a use of 115% of the actual budgeted cash spending. And in-kind support brought up the rear and was not utilized to the same extent. This represents full utilization of the planned budgets in year 4 to support the research projects. May I have the next slide, please? Now, this provides an interesting overview of the trend in expenses. Each of these pies is not the same size, but it represents the proportion of funding. And if we start on the right-hand side in year 1, you can see that even from the get-go, almost half of the dollars expended by CANSOLV CKD were devoted to research, with about 21% to management and administration, and then stakeholder engagement. As the budget increased, you can see that the amounts of money devoted to research through years 2, 3, and 4 steadily increased, so that in year 4, fully 73% of all dollars spent support the research activities. You can also see that management and administration was front-end loaded, and as the programs developed, this became a less significant component of the overall budget, and currently represents between 2 and 4% of overall expenditures, representing, I think, a very efficient organization that directs the dollars towards the important activities. Stakeholder engagement in year 1 was very significant. This was really involved in the initiation of the programs, the engagement of the partners, and the building of the patient partner teams. And as we move through years 2, 3, and 4, this remains a significant expenditure of dollars because, of course, indeed, stakeholder engagement, patient engagement are critical aspects that are important to CANSOLV CKD, and indeed represent the very core of the research program. I think it's representing now a steady state of between 5 and 10% of overall funding, and then supplies, materials, and services to support the research initiative, as well as the administrative functions and the administration required for stakeholder engagement. May I have the next slide, please? Having provided this snapshot of the direction of changes, the growth in the overall research expenditure, the steady state expenditures in administration, and the continued focus on patient engagement, I'd like to tell you a little bit now about what we're looking forward to. 460 people have contributed considerable time and effort to develop a national research network. Embedded within that research network are very important infrastructure programs. Those infrastructure programs we've talked about, they include the Canadian Nephrology Trials Network. They include specific programs that engage patients and increase the awareness of kidney research in Canada. And these programs are directly related to the input patients provided to the research network. Having coming towards the end of CANSOLV CKD 1, we're looking at CANSOLV CKD 2.0, and this is the notion that, of course, we want to renew these efforts and support the critical elements that so many people have worked so hard to build. So what we actually hope to achieve in CANSOLV CKD 2 is what's termed here a meaningful, feasible, and economical plan, co-built by the community of investigators and stakeholders, that allows the initiatives that have been developed to move forward and will enable the complete maturation of the research projects so that they can evolve towards impacting kidney care in Canada. May I have the next slide, please? This gives you a timeline of a strategy that CANSOLV CKD has developed that we think will enable us to be well positioned to move towards renewal. In June of 2020, we convened the first workshop, and this involved between 40 and 50 participants that included researchers, patient partners, and stakeholders. And the primary goal of this workshop was indeed to focus on the goals and overall priorities. And indeed, it was determined that early diagnosis, better treatment, and innovative care would remain at the core priorities of a CANSOLV CKD 2.0. This was followed by a workshop that was held just a month ago, which focused on the research programs, not so much deciding which research programs would go forward, but really focusing on process. What will a research program have to demonstrate in order to move on to CANSOL CKD 2.0, and how indeed will we measure that? There'll be a third workshop, pardon me, that will occur in February, and this will focus on the core infrastructure programs, how we hope to evolve those, and of course, include important feedback from the patient partners and from the stakeholders within our community. And then finally, there'll be in June a fourth workshop, which will focus predominantly on performance measurement, how we look at research programs, how we look at the core infrastructure, how we measure their impact, and how we judge what will be the component pieces of CANSOL CKD 2.0. The Sustainability Planning Committee has been formed. It has a calendar of events going forward, and importantly, within this community, we're developing a core value statement and taking into account, I think, important factors. I think if ever more important than now, equity, diversity, and inclusion, and again involving the diverse interests and perspectives of members of our research community. May I have the next slide, please? Now, one of the challenges that we face in CANSOL CKD, and as we move forward with CANSOL CKD 2.0, is some uncertainty as to the timeline. The original program was awarded a 5-year grant from 2016 to 2021. And indeed, most of the research programs were beginning to be launched in 2017 moving forward. COVID-19 has had a considerable impact on the activities of research funding agencies in Canada. And in recognition of the tremendous impact and the detrimental impact that COVID-19 has had on patient engagement and patient-related research, the CIHR extended the funding deadline for CANSOL CKD to March 31st, 2023. And indeed, this put some increased pressure on our budgets because we had to submit reports to the CIHR indicating how the original monies that were gathered to support our research effort could be extended forward to 2023. And so we have begun to communicate in we hope an ever more effective manner with CIHR to let them know about the pressures that extending the program has created for us. Next slide, please. Now, this table represents in much more granularity some of the challenges that we'll face. So I'd like to focus on the 4 columns: CIHR funds, partner funds in kind, and then the total. And if you look at the research projects, it's anticipated that we'll have a CIHR funding deficit of about $224,000 by March 31st, 2023. We'll actually have a modest positive balance in partner funds and a small deficit in patient fund and partner funds that are in kind. So we anticipate the research projects will move forward with a surplus of $165,000 by March 31st, 2023. The core operations is much more challenging for us, and the core operations represents not only the administrative team, which is the glue that holds CANSOL CKD together, but also the administrative support that's required for the key infrastructure programs that have been developed. We anticipate a funding deficit in terms of CIHR dollars of $390,000 accrued through the final year of funding, and then indeed a cash deficit from patient partner funds of over $400,000, so that core operations that support administration and the infrastructure, we anticipate a deficit of $815,000. When we look at the sum total shown in the lowest column, we anticipate about $600,000 to $700,000 deficit by March 31st, 2023. And this is the important reason we're in communication with CIHR, so that they are aware of the impact of the extension of the funding deadlines and the uncertainty of the renewal launch on our budget. And we hope that this dialogue with CIHR will be successful and allow us to gain some administrative support. Next slide, please. So now I'd like to turn over the program to our patient partners. This includes Mary, Arlene, and Kathy. Arlene, you may be muted.
Hang on, just. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we
Yes,
can
we
hear
can.
Hear you now.
Terrific.
Hello, I'm Arlene Desjardins. I'm a patient partner and I've been with CanSolve probably since October 2018. I was the caregiver to my husband, Glenn, who passed away in February 2016. Throughout Glenn's journey, I mean, I certainly used my voice for anything and everything he ever needed with his care. And throughout his journey, I always said that if there was anything I could ever do to voice my our experience or just generally use my voice to speak on behalf of patients and advocate for everything that they ever needed, I was going to do that. And so when he passed away, Paul Commenda asked, well, they were very respectful with my grieving. And when I was ready, I approached and said, you know, I'm ready to go. And I literally hit the ground running with them. And I'm on several different committees. I'm on the IPERC committee, the Wabashki Bizigu Learning Pathway. I'm part of the ROC, Kidney Check, the Home First. I'm on a research project, the Triple I, and the deep prescribing. And I'm also on the sustainability committee. So, I mean, it seems like a whole lot, but when you're passionate about something and you see the difference that's being made by CanSolve CKD, you absolutely cannot sit on the sidelines and not want to get involved. For me, I see CanSolve's has changed my life, and I really don't know where I would have been in the grieving process had I not been part of this group, because I want no one to ever have to suffer the loss that I did. And if I can use my voice to do that, and I'm going to do that till the end of time. And I know someone asked me, why would someone want to fund this group? Well, why wouldn't you want to? If I can use my voice to talk, why can't you use your funds to fund, to do this incredibly life-changing work? I mean, this group is absolutely passionate about everything. And as a patient partner, you're able to voice your opinions and talk, and you're heard. You're heard. And it's very much a learning experience for the patient partner as it is for the clinician, the researcher, anybody involved. So, I mean, life-changing doesn't even begin to explain what this been me. You know, it doesn't bring back my Glenn, but he lives through. And because I talk about him so much, I never wanted him to be a statistic on a piece of paper. I want him to be that person that you remember and that you strive to research and find a cure for CKD. That's it for me.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kathy Woods, and I reside on Treaty 1 territory in Winnipeg, Manitoba. CanSolve CKD is important to Canadian health research because of our diverse research projects that have the ability to change the kidney health for all Canadians. To me personally, to be able to give back to Indigenous and health communities that supported me with medicines, teachings, and clinical assistance to deal with my own kidney disease. I am grateful for my health and have learned how to advocate for myself and to be a voice for those folks that need kidney health care the most. In my journey, I have grown with the help of CanSolve CKD Network to be a force to be reckoned with, and will not stop advocating for better health services for our Indigenous communities and all who are in need of kidney care and wellness. We as patient partners in CanSolve CKD are changing the face of research. Our patient partner involvement in kidney research leads to projects that will change our health outcomes for the better by doing research that is relevant to us as patients. By joining with us in true partnership, you have the opportunity to impact the wellness and lives of those affected with kidney disease, along with their families. As patient partners, we are passionate about our involvement. because we are part of the process and it is our health we are talking about. Please be with us. Our hope is that one day there will be a cure. Wouldn't that be cool? Merci, miigwech, all my relations.
Mary, over to you.
Thank you, Kathy and Arlene, for your heartfelt words. My name is Mary Bocage. In 2013, my Auntie Angie and I were both on dialysis. She was 83 and I was 44. Some days we sat side by side, but it was easier on both of us if we didn't see each other. I also saw people from my community coming and going for the same reason on different shifts. As I sat in that chair, I had a lot of time to reflect. I thought about other members from my family who sat in chairs like these over the years. I gazed out the window and I could see my First Nation just meters away. I knew that if I was meant to have a transplant, that I would do all I could to make a difference in the lives of people with CKD, especially those who looked like me. It sounds noble, but I'm a big picture thinker and I couldn't shake the feeling that this was bigger than me. It became my responsibility. I had that transplant in 2015, a special gift from my cousin Janice. Being part of the CanSolve CKD network since our first official meeting in Halifax in 2016 has allowed me and others to be agents of change in what patient engagement looks like and how research is being done across Canada. It's brought people together who share that bond of CKD, whether it's through lived experience as a patient, caregiver, family member, or living donor, or whether it's your job on the core team, or whether you are a part of research or a policymaker. We all come from differences, but find commonalities when we work together. We all have roles, but are equal and work equally when we work together. We are innovative and collaborative when we work together. There are opportunities for all of us to teach and learn when we work together. It's not always easy, but we find solutions when we work together. My auntie and others have since passed on to the spirit realm. Sadly, more people will fill those dialysis chairs. The work we are doing at CanSolve CKD will ensure that every Canadian with or at high risk for chronic kidney disease will receive the best recommended care, experience optimal outcomes, and have the opportunity to participate in studies with innovative treatments regardless of age, sex, gender, location, or ethnicity. As funders, it is crucial that you are part of what makes things happen at CanSolve CKD. We are all better when we work together. Miigwech, thank you.
Thank you, Mary and Kathy and Arlene, as well as to Jim and Braden, and obviously to the entire core CanSolve CKD team that put together all of the work, and many of you are on this call. I think that what we'd really like, and we have scheduled this till the bottom of the hour, but appreciate that people have lots going on. We really would like to hear any questions or comments, especially from our funding partners. You know, I think this is an important time. I think it's a powerful time in history. As I said before, there are on the horizon many new therapies and strategies and better abilities to diagnose people, both with simple testing as in kidney check, as well as with more sophisticated molecular diagnostics and other things that are really changing the landscape. We'd love to be in the middle and driving this change with participation of everyone. So perhaps we'll ask if there are any questions. If you're shy about talking, you can put it in your chat box. There was a question from Anik around stakeholders include patients in all cases, as well as policymakers, and we do have some on the call today, and I think that is important that we've included, where possible, people within both renal agencies, but also ministries of health where there is a direct line and some accountability, funding groups that are broader than kidney but understand the value of what we're doing. I don't know, Braden, if you had any other, while we're waiting for people, if there's any other comments you wanted to make.
No, I think it would be just good to hear some questions from the funders.
Right.
Nancy's got a question. Looks like.
So Nancy, you're happy to comment to Victoria's question. So for context, Victoria is at the Ministry of Health in British Columbia. And she just asked a question in terms of the CIHR communication around renewal. So Nancy.
Oh, that's serendipitous. I didn't actually see that question. I was more going to comment on what I heard. So I can tackle both. I don't know if my video is on and people can see me. I can't see myself. So
yeah,
there we go.
It is.
There we go. Hi, everyone. So first off, congratulations on all the work. I think it's an incredible amount of success that you have achieved over the last 5 years, recognizing that it wasn't 5 years fully of research. There was a lot of administrative work that went into getting this network up and running. So congratulations, and my gratitude for the work that you're doing in demonstrating some pretty important exemplars of how SPORE was envisioned to roll out, in particular around having patient-driven, patient-centered outcomes at the core, having patients engaged all throughout the work that you do, and in particular, really seeing on the ground how patients are being engaged in the governance and their voices being heard. So congratulations on that front. With regard to Victoria's question around any kind of continuity of funding from CIHR, we continue to work through that question. It's not a no, it's not a yes at this point. Anything that does come forward from CIHR would be competitive. There would not be any sort of directed grant, which means something specific for CanSolve CKD. We're also at this point not looking at bridge opportunities because we are looking at the budgets of all the networks and seeing that many of them are continuing their funding until at least into next fiscal year. But information will be coming hopefully in the next couple of months regarding CIHR's thoughts on this process. And we are looking to engage partners in conversations on that front as well. I do have a question, if I might, as well.
Sure.
Okay. So just curious if the budgets that were presented in the overall slide showing the deficit that begins to show in 2022, I think it is, or at the end of 2023, I guess is more exact to what was presented. Does that include the COVID relief funding that has been received from CIHR?
Not as of yet, Nancy. We've just received that funds in the last couple of weeks, so they will be included going forwards.
Okay, perfect. So good to know, and I think good, important. If you've mentioned that to this group, apologies. I've been dealing with a puppy while listening to this. As well, just flagging that those funds have been available, have been made available from CIHR. And then just a point of clarification that while we extended what is called the authority to use funds date, which is that March 31st, 2023 date, it is to allow for the network to use the funds that have been allocated to them from CIHR. Again, with the assumption that partner funds would also be made available as outlined in the grant agreement, but that it wasn't expected necessarily that the networks would necessarily have funds until then. It's just important for us to get an understanding of at what point do deficits starts to show up.
Well, that's really helpful,
Thank you.
Nancy. Thank you. And Heather's just put in the chat that we will receive $260,000 in federal relief funding, so that it will be great. Victoria, you had another comment So I'll turn it over to you. Oops, unmute. This is like, are you still there, Victoria? There you are. Yeah. Great. Yes. Great. Thank you.
I'm on my phone.
Mute your computer. Put on your mute on the computer.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Mute your computer. Put the little bar on your computer. Like, there we go. Now talk into your phone. Who would have thought I would be tech support? No, now we can't hear you. Let's try that again. Or do you want to type it in or too long?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Could everybody else mute?
I think she's going to try and type it. Yes. Excellent. Thank you, Victoria. Other comments from our funding partners, especially this was intended for you, to give you a feel of where we were, where we've come to, and where we're going. It is a unique network. I think, as Nancy said, it truly embraced in every way, shape, and form the intention of a strategy for patient-oriented research. We live it, breathe it, and continue to do it. And so, and it's with your support. As Braden and Jim mentioned, above our expectations, we matched much more than the one-to-one that was expected. And that gave us a lot of hope and interest. And so just interested in some comments that you may have and how in a changing landscape, we can continue to work together. I mean, I particularly want to call out the tremendous support of Kidney Foundation of Canada and all of its work with its patient partners, at the same time supporting research, but also many of their funds also go to support patients directly in need. And so I think that that's been, you know, and as many of you know, during COVID, the nonprofits were particularly hard hit in terms of various methods of fundraising, and yet continue to work closely with us to continue to envision and improve lives for people living with kidney disease. So maybe Elizabeth, I don't know if you'd like to comment as well while we wait and see if there's any other thoughts.
Sure, dear, I'm happy to. Let me turn on my camera as well. Just wanted to thank you for this presentation and all of the patient partners who so eloquently spoke. I think the CanSolve CKD has been an amazing success in terms of the patient engagement and changing the face of how research is done in the kidney space. And I think that's a tremendous accomplishment, and CanSolve CKD has shown amazing leadership in this area, and looking forward to that continuing, certainly, and the continuing support of the Kidney Foundation as well on the work. I do have just one question. I had to step away, so maybe you've addressed it. But I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about, or I'll just refer me to the recording if you've already addressed it, in terms of how COVID has impacted the project timelines.
We didn't address it specifically. I mean, there are many things that had to go on paused. I think it also was an opportunity to do some things virtually and engage people. some of the studies are finishing up, as Braden alluded to, in terms of empathy, which is great. Kidney check obviously has been put on hold for a number of reasons, so that will really change the timeline, our ability to complete that. And I think COVID has taken its toll on a lot of things, including the fact that by extending the timeline, as Jim articulated, there are some things that even relief funding can't actually fill a gap. So I think we'll know more when COVID's not going to be over, but when things have returned a bit more to normal, we'll have a better sense of what can and can't be caught up. But thank you for the question. Victoria actually did manage to write something down, and I think she had to, it's an exemplar. So what was that? How could this endeavor be used to demonstrate what is possible in the Ministry of Health? It's not necessarily assumed. And I think it's an interesting concept, right? I think there were some other questions that Leah prompted. So for our funders, what stood out for you in this presentation, and what have you learned, or what would you like to know more about, perhaps is worthwhile? Maybe Anik, can I call on you?
Yes, no problem. Hi, everyone. Yes, Dr. Levin, me obviously what stood out, it's the rapid progress, the number of publications, the number of projects, the involvement of the patients. And it was one of my questions about what was your definition of stakeholders. So I'm impressed with all the progresses that have been made in such a short time. And with that many stakeholders and parties involved into CanSolve CKD. So kudos to everybody. It's we're part of the discussions back in 2014 with you and Dr. Mans, and seeing this beautiful progress, hearing the patients as well was very touching. So kudos to everyone involved in that very big project.
Thank you. Yeah, no, and we appreciate that these virtual Zoom meetings with everybody in Brady Bunch boxes is not the same. I think all of us are feeling the Zoomness of everything. That being said, this is a way to get us across the country all together. Natalie, can I ask you if you have any questions?
Well, first, just thanks for the opportunity to join, and really impressive work. It's great to see kind of the progressive approach you're taking and leading across the industry. I think just as an industry sponsor, I guess my question would be, what opportunity do you see in the coming years for increased engagement with industry, both opportunities and potential challenges across the network with that? Would love to hear your perspective around that, Adira and others.
I think, one of the things that, if we're really going to change the culture of the way we do research, as many of you know, like our thing is, before people design trials, please have the patients at the table. And can we design them together, whether they're phase 2 or phase 3 studies? I think we need people at all the different parts. And I think that, as I think most of you in our industry partners especially, and perhaps our other foundation partners have heard, is that over time, our patients don't become professional patient partners. They get skills to help them voice what they think is important and how they can help in the research process. And I think that's something that's quite different than, we just have a bunch of people that are professional patients. That's not it at all. Each person brings their own perspective, their own set of skills, whether it's as a researcher, as a banker, as a business person, as an educator, as a mother. These are all incredibly important perspectives that are really important when we're designing a trial, when we're learning the results of a trial, when we're trying to get people, to know what medicines exist for them, that they need to advocate for. Like, these are all the things that I think we're trying to modify and change. So that would be my sort of short answer. Kathy, did you want to add something or?
Yes, I just wanted to talk to the industry partners about the process and about how we do our work. And I think it would be helpful. You know, I know a lot of times in terms of, you know, it's about the dollars, it's about the investment, all of those things. But, you know, I think that if industry partners could hear more from us as patients that are involved in the process, and that you can truly see the difference that it's made in our lives, and also the difference that the research will make in for all patients and their families, and to be able to hear that, whether it's ideally it would be nice to have a face-to-face, but to be able to hear that from our perspective about the difference that it's made, to bring those other, and that's why we talk about partnership, is we talk about doing these things together, and you need to hear from us. You need to hear what this means to us. And, you know, we truly are passionate. We're not going away. We're going to keep moving forward. And we really, really need the dollars to be able to make a difference. And I realize it's really difficult in this time of COVID, but the projects still move on. The Kidney Check project that I'm a patient lead on has just received an international award, and we're doing great things despite COVID, and we keep moving forward, and we keep moving forward as a group. We don't. One of the things about CanSolve is that as patients, we all work together, and we go forward as a group. And so we're asking you as industry and as funders and policymakers to come with us and to be part of that. And we hope that you take the opportunity to be able to make a difference as we move forward in these trying times. Miigwech.
Yeah, thank you, Kathy. I'm conscious of the time and that, you know, it's hard for people to spend, you know, more than an hour, but I think those are excellent words to end on. And fitting. So I want to thank the whole team, all of you for your attention, the whole CanSolve team, our patient partners, and all the supporters of the various committees and teams. And really to remind everyone, number one, that this video has been recorded, so it's available on the website to show people it's public domain. And the other thing is that if you do have specific questions as an industry partner or a foundation partner, then to please reach out. And to Kathy's point, I think it would behoove us to have conversations, not just with the leadership, but the leadership with our patient partners, so that you can ask us both the questions and you will hear the answers from both perspectives. So with that, thank you very much, everyone, for making the time. Kathy, Mary, and Arlene for sharing your stories. David for sharing the experience of the Patient Governance Circle and how it has grown, and Graham for your fantastic shepherding of slides and all of our channeling. So have a great rest of the day, and you all got 20 minutes back in the day for those of you that blocked off the hour and a half. So thanks again.